The alarm tore through the bridge before I even understood what had happened. Red light washed over every console. The floor shook once, hard, and my claws dug into the edge of my station to keep me upright. Somewhere below us, deep in the belly of the ship, something had torn open that was never meant to tear. My name is Thriakai Voss. I am a navigator of the Ithic fleet, and until that moment, I believed I understood exactly what courage looked like. I was about to learn how wrong I was. Hull breach, Deck 4, the ship's voice announced, calm in a way that felt almost cruel against the chaos around me. Reactor containment failing, estimated time to critical failure, 90 seconds. 90 seconds. I had heard those words in drills 100 times. I had never heard them mean anything until that moment. Half the bridge crew stood frozen. I stood frozen too, my crest flattened against my skull, my mind racing through 100 half-formed thoughts that led nowhere useful. Panic, I realized later, does not feel like fire, it feels like ice. It freezes your thoughts before you can use them. Then I heard a chair scrape against the floor, and I turned to see the one person on that bridge who had not frozen at all. His name was Daniel Cole, the quietest member of our crew, a human ensign who had barely spoken a full sentence to me in 6 months of shared duty. I had mocked him for that silence more than once. I had called him weak. I had told him, more than once, that his kind must simply have nothing worth saying. He never argued back. He simply let the silence answer for him. Now that silence moved with a purpose I had never seen before. Daniel crossed the bridge in a few fast steps and dropped into the empty engineering seat, the one our chief engineer should have been sitting in, before the first shockwave threw her against a wall and knocked her unconscious. His hands were already flying across the controls before his body had even settled into the chair. "Thriakai," he said, his voice flat and even, as if the ship were not trying to kill us all at that exact moment. "I need main power rerouted through the secondary conduits right now, or we lose the reactor before that timer hits 0. I stared at him. My mind was still catching up to the alarms, the shaking floor, the smell of burning wire drifting through the vents. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Now," he said again, and something about the steadiness in that single word moved my hands before my thoughts caught up with them. I rerouted the power exactly as he asked. The lights on the bridge dimmed, flickered, and steadied. Somewhere far below us, I imagined the reactor pulling itself back from the edge of disaster, though I could not see it, and I would not have known what it looked like even if I could. I only knew what to watch for because Daniel told me, calmly, exactly where to look, and exactly what numbers meant danger. "Decompression is spreading on Deck 4, called Priya, our communications officer, her voice climbing higher with every word. She was young, barely out of training, and I could hear the fear breaking through her composure, like water through a cracked wall. "Seal bulkheads 12 through 15, Daniel said, without even turning his head toward her. "Vent the emergency oxygen reserve into the corridor first. Give anyone still trapped in there 30 more seconds to reach the seal points. That leaves us with no emergency reserve if the bridge loses pressure," Priya said, her hands hovering over her controls, unsure. "Then we make sure the bridge does not lose pressure," Daniel answered, already keying in a countermeasure for a hull stress fracture that none of the rest of us had even noticed yet. I watched him track failure after failure, cascading through the ship faster than my mind could follow, and I understood, in that moment, that he had been holding all of it in his head long before any alarm ever sounded. There was no fear in his voice. I learned much later that this did not mean he felt none. Humans, I would come to understand, feel fear as sharply as any creature I have ever known. But somewhere beneath that fear, Daniel had built a place fear could not reach, a place built only for the next necessary action, and nothing else. 3 engineers from Deck 4 made it to the escape pods before the corridor sealed shut behind them. 2 more were trapped on the wrong side of a jammed bulkhead, their voices crackling through the comm system, tight with panic. Daniel did not raise his voice to calm them. He simply spoke to them, slowly and clearly, walking them through the manual override sequence step by step, while the ship groaned and shuddered around all of us like something alive and dying at the same time. I do not know how long it took. It felt like a lifetime folded into a few unbearable minutes. When the second bulkhead finally sealed and the trapped engineers confirmed they were clear, I felt something in my chest loosen that I had not realized was clenched so tightly. The ship's voice returned, steadier now. "Reactor containment stable. Hull breach sealed. Emergency status reduced." For a moment, nobody on the bridge moved. Nobody cheered. The silence that followed felt heavier than the alarms had, as if we were all afraid that speaking too soon might undo everything we had just survived. I looked down and realized my crest was still pressed flat against my skull, a posture my people use only in complete submission, something I had never once shown in my entire career. Not even before my own commanding officers. I had shown it now, without meaning to, in front of a human I had spent 6 months mocking for his silence. Daniel finally leaned back in the engineering seat. His hands, I noticed now, were shaking slightly, small tremors he had not had time to notice while he was working. He exhaled slowly, like someone setting down something heavy after carrying it much too far. "Report," he said quietly, and Priya began reading damage figures aloud in a voice still thin from adrenaline. I found him later in the mess hall, sitting alone with a cup of something dark and steaming that he had not touched. I sat across from him without asking permission first, which for an Ithic is its own quiet form of apology. "You knew," I said. "The whole time. You knew exactly what to do before the rest of us even understood what was happening." "I did not know," he said. "I just did not have time to be confused. There is a difference." "You were afraid," I said. It was not a question. Every second of it. He looked up at me then, and there was nothing soft in his eyes at all. Nothing that matched the quiet, careful way he usually carried himself. Being quiet does not mean I have nothing to defend, Thriakai. It means I already spent my words a long time ago, on things that mattered less than this moment. When it counts, I do not need to announce what I am about to do. I just do it. I thought back over every challenge I had thrown at him across those 6 months. Every quiet moment I had mistaken for weakness. Among my people, a warrior proves her worth by how loudly she meets a threat. Sitting there in that mess hall, with my crest still refusing to lift, I understood that I had been measuring the wrong thing entirely. "I misjudged you," I said. For an Ithic, those words cost more than most creatures could understand. Daniel almost smiled, though it never quite reached his eyes. Everyone does, at first. He finally lifted his cup and drank from it. "We are a quiet people until the day we are not. You just happened to be standing there when that day came." I never mocked him again after that. In truth, I stopped mocking silence itself, because I finally understood what it could be hiding. Not weakness, as I had always believed, but readiness. A quiet mind held steady, waiting for the one moment that would matter more than every loud moment that came before it. Word of what happened on Deck 4 spread through the ship within a day, though Daniel never spoke of it himself. It was Priya who told the story to anyone who would listen, describing how he had moved through those alarms like a man walking through a storm he had already memorized every step of. Even our captain, a stern old commander of a species even less inclined to praise than my own, called Daniel to the bridge and thanked him personally, though the meeting lasted less than a minute, and Daniel said almost nothing in return. That, I realized, was simply who he was. He did not need the moment after the crisis any more than he had needed noise before it. The work was enough for him. The result was enough for him. He needed nothing else to prove what he already knew about himself. In the weeks that followed, I found myself watching him differently. Not with suspicion, as I once had, but with something closer to respect, though I was slow to name it as such. I watched him move through ordinary duties with the same quiet focus he had shown during the crisis, never wasting a word, never performing a feeling he did not actually have. I began to understand that this was not the absence of character. It was character distilled down to its most essential form. One evening, weeks later, I asked him why he had never defended himself against my mockery, why he had simply let my words pass over him without response. He thought about it for a long moment before answering. "Some things are not worth arguing about," he said. "People believe what they need to believe until life shows them something different. Arguing rarely changes a mind. A moment like that one usually does." I had no answer for that. I still do not, even now, though I have had a long time to think it over. I have served alongside many species since that day, and I have seen bravery take many different shapes. I have seen warriors roar before a battle, and warriors who said nothing at all. I used to believe that noise was the true measure of courage, that silence was simply the absence of something worth saying. I no longer believe that. Daniel Cole taught me, in the space of a few unbearable minutes, that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the one already carrying the weight of everyone else's survival, simply waiting for the moment when quiet effort would matter more than any words ever could. Humans, I have come to understand, are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They are quiet because they are listening, always, for the moment when their silence will finally be needed most. And when that moment comes, they do not hesitate. They do not perform. They simply act, with a steadiness that can hold an entire ship together when everything around it is falling apart. I carry that lesson with me still, on every ship I have served aboard since, in every crisis I have faced with different crews and different dangers. I no longer mistake silence for weakness. I have learned to watch for it instead, because I know now what it might be quietly preparing to become.